Since the 1970s, Colombia has been home to some of the most violent drug trafficking organizations in the world. Medellin, Colombia, one of the world's most vicious criminal organizations, home to some of the most dreaded, powerful, and dangerous drug cartels, was just not the place to mess around. Welcome to the dark underbelly of Colombia during the 1980s, where three notorious figures, Carlos Leder, José Rodríguez Gacha, and the Ochoa brothers, rose to infamy as the architects of the Medellin Cartel. Their reign was marked by violence, betrayal, and an insatiable thirst for power that left a bloody legacy still felt today. History of the Medellin Cartel. Founded and led by Pablo Escobar, the Medellin Cartel was a powerful and highly organized Colombian drug cartel and terrorist organization originating in the city of Medellin, Colombia. What started as a small cocaine smuggling business has, in the last 30 years, blossomed into an enormous multinational cocaine empire. The astounding profits attracted an interesting mix of characters into the business. José González Rodríguez Gacha had roots in Colombia's somewhat murky emerald trade. The Ochoa brothers, however, were from a well-respected ranching and horsing family, and the violent leader, Pablo Escobar, was a common street thief who masterminded the criminal enterprise that became known as the Medellin Cartel. Before we dive into the details concerning these dangerous mob bosses, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for similar updates like this. Carlos Enrique Leder. In the shadows of Medellin, Colombia, a storm was brewing. A storm fueled by greed, ambition, and an insatiable thirst for power. This is the true story of Carlos Leder, a man who transformed the cocaine trade forever and became one of the most feared mob bosses in history. Carlos Enrique Leder Rivas was born on September 7, 1949 in Armenia, Colombia. With a German immigrant father and a tumultuous childhood, Leder's early years were marked by rebellion. And by his teenage years in the United States, he was already smuggling stolen cars and dabbling in marijuana. However, it was during his time in a Connecticut prison that he met George Jung, a meeting that would change the trajectory of his life forever. Upon their release in 1976, Leder and Jung embarked on a new adventure: cocaine smuggling. At this time, they quickly realized that transporting cocaine by airplane was far more lucrative than marijuana, and by 1978, Leder had seized control of Norman's Cay in the Bahamas, transforming it into a bustling hub for cocaine trafficking. Here, he built an empire, with planes landing daily loaded with drugs destined for the United States. Over time, Leder's lifestyle became so extravagant as he threw wild parties filled with drugs and debauchery, flaunting his wealth while amassing an estimated $300 million annually from his operations. But, as we know, with great power came great danger. As Leder's influence grew, so did his erratic behavior, with his violent temper becoming notorious among allies and enemies alike. Obviously, this reign of terror could not last forever. In 1982, pressure from the U.S. authorities forced Leder to abandon Norman's Cay, making him return to Colombia, but not without leaving a trail of violence in his wake. During this period, Medellin Cartel was already at war, not just with rival cartels, but also with law enforcement agencies determined to dismantle their empire. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, launched operations targeting the Medellin Cartel's supply chains. Yet, Leder remained elusive, with his intelligence making him a formidable opponent against authorities who underestimated him. But as the bodies began piling up, police officers assassinated, rival traffickers eliminated, Leder's empire began to crumble from within. Tensions rose between him and Pablo Escobar, leading to a betrayal that would seal his fate. On February 4, 1987, after years on the run, Carlos Letter was finally captured by Colombian National Police, reportedly betrayed by none other than Escobar himself. Within hours, he was extradited to the United States, where he faced trial in Jacksonville, Florida, for conspiracy and running a criminal enterprise. 1 year later, Letter Rivas was convicted on all counts and was sentenced to life without parole plus an additional 135 years. But even behind bars, Letter's cunning attitude did not fade. In a significant turn of events, Letter agreed to cooperate with U.S. authorities on a high-profile case. He testified against Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega in exchange for a reduced sentence. After serving over 3 decades in prison, Carlos was released in 2020, deported back to Germany, where he now lives under a cloud of infamy. His legacy? A chilling reminder of how ambition can lead to destruction, not just for oneself, but for countless others caught in the crossfire. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Mob Boss, and hit the notification button for more thrilling true stories. Jose Gacha Rodriguez. Known as Don Sombrero and El Mexicano, Gacho was a prominent Colombian drug lord and a key figure in the Medellin Cartel alongside Pablo Escobar and the Ochoa brothers. Jose Gacha rose to infamy during the 1980s, becoming one of the world's most successful drug traffickers, with Forbes listing him among billionaires in 1988. Gacha was notorious for his violent tactics, forming paramilitary groups to combat guerrilla threats, and his massive wealth through extensive cocaine trafficking operations until his death in a police confrontation in 1989. Gacha was born in May 1947 in the small town of Veraguas near Pacho in the department of Cundinamarca. He came from a poor family of cheese vendors and had his formal education, which did not extend beyond grade school. Leaving school in the early 1970s and moving to Muzo, Boyaca, the center of the emerald exploitation in Colombia, he began to work under Gilberto Molina Moreno, who, at the time, was called the Czar of Emeralds in Boyaca, as part of his security. As he started to go up in the ranks among Molina's men, he became acquainted with drug traffickers. Over time, Rodriguez Gacha discovered that the drug business was more profitable, so he decided to become independent. He moved to Bogota and became associated with Veronica Rivera de Vargas, a pioneering drug trafficker who was known as the Queen of Cocaine, by murdering the family of her main rival. Afterwards, Rivera introduced him to Pablo Escobar and to Mexican drug lord Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. This introduction led to his collaboration with Pablo in drug trafficking. Within a short period, Rodriguez Gacha started to buy larger amounts of land in the Middle Magdalena region in the valley bordering the departments of Antioquia, Boyaca, and Santander. During the late 1970s, Rodriguez advanced in the organizational hierarchy, pioneering new trafficking routes through Mexico and into the United States, primarily Los Angeles, California, and Houston. He became the first to establish cooperation strategies with drug trafficking cartels in Mexico. This, coupled with his infatuation with Mexican popular culture, music, and horse culture, and his fondness for foul language, earned him the nicknames El Mexicano, the Mexican, and Don Sombrero. Rodriguez Gacha based much of his operations in Bogota and other areas in the Cundinamarca region, as well as in the Middle Magdalena region. It was Rodriguez who first set up Tranquilandia, one of the world's largest and best known of the jungle laboratories, where more than 2,000 people lived and worked making and packaging cocaine. As he became one of the main capos of the rising cartel, Rodriguez Gacha started having problems with the FARC guerrilla, mostly because the insurgent army taxed some of his cocaine plantations and they sometimes robbed some of his men. On March 7, 1984, Colombian authorities and the DEA destroyed Rodriguez Gacha's Tranquilandia complex. This was a significant blow to the Medellin cartel. A few weeks later, on April 30th, 1984, Colombian Minister of Justice Rodrigo Lara, who had crusaded against the Medellin cartel, was assassinated by armed men on a motorcycle. In response, President Belisario Betancourt, who had previously exposed extradition, made an announcement that we will extradite Colombians. Carlos' letter was the first to be put on the list. The crackdown forced the Ochoas, Escobar, and Rodriguez to flee Panama for several months. A few months later, Escobar was indicted for Lara's murder, and Rodriguez was named as a material witness. In an attempt to handle the situation, Escobar, Rodriguez, and the Ochoa brothers met with the former Colombian president Alfonso Lopez in the Hotel Marriott in Panama City. The negotiation failed after news of it leaked to the press, provoking the open opposition of the United States to any immunity deal. Well, with every good day comes a bad day, I guess. The growth of Rodriguez Gacha's criminal empire had allowed him to increase his fortune, but also made him a lot of enemies. By 1987, animosity started with the Cali Cartel, his previous partners in MAS, as he attempted to move in on the New York City market. The animosity turned into an open cartel war in 1988, moved mostly by the personal vendetta of Pablo Escobar against Pacho Herrera. As the military leader of the cartel, Rodriguez Gacha was instrumental in many assassinations and other violent actions against the Cali cartel. Furthermore, he was already in an open war against the FARC guerrilla, and he was already in a crusade against the Colombian government and the DEA. His push to join his properties in his hometown of Pacho with his many lands in the Middle Magdalena region soon put him in conflict with his old allies in the emerald business. To ensure his dominion on the land, Rodriguez Gacha became involved in an intense and violent power struggle over control of the emerald mines. He started the 1989 Year of Horror in Colombia by massacring 12 judicial officials to allegedly eliminate evidence linked to him from legal records. On February 27, 1989, he directed a group of 25 gunmen to kill emerald magnate Gilberto Molina, his former boss, who was previously considered among his close associates, along with 16 other individuals at a party in Molina's home. Then he went after his former associate, Veronica Rivera, the Queen of Cocaine. She was killed in Bogota by hitmen under his command on July 1st, 1989. Still on the killing spree, he detonated a bomb in the offices of Tecminas Bogota, which were properties of Victor Carranza, the new Emerald Czar, whose nephew's murder he also ordered. In no time, Don Sombrero was later charged in Colombia and the United States for his involvement in a number of killings, including the assassination of the president of the leftist Patriotic Union Party, Jaime Pardo Leal, on October 12, 1987, in retaliation for guerrilla attacks on drug traffickers in the Eastern Plains area. Pablo Escobar and Rodriguez contracted trained hitmen by Jair Klein for the slaying of popular presidential candidate Luis Carlos Galan on August 18, 1989, who was considered likely to be elected as Colombia's next president. After the murder of Galan, Don Sombrero had begun to have a less active role in the terrorist attacks of the Medellin cartel. At the time of his death, Rodriguez Gacha was fighting wars simultaneously against the Colombian government, the Cali cartel, the FARC guerrillas, the DEA, and the emerald businessmen led by Victor Carranza. In no time, most of them started collaborating to bring him down. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Mob Boss, and hit the notification button for more thrilling true crime stories. Jorge Velasquez, alias El Navegante, an informant placed by the Cali cartel into Gacha's organization, who was allegedly seeking the government reward, revealed to the police that the drug lord was in Cartagena de Indias, protected by 25 bodyguards. On the arrival of the police, Gacha fled to Tolu by motorboat. At the destination, the drug lord was accompanied by his son Freddy, Gilberto Rendon Hurtado, alias Mano de Yuca, the alleged number 8 man in the Medellin cartel, Patrol, 4 bodyguards, and El Navegante. El Navegante again gave information on Gacha's location to the police after he left in the evening on December 14, 1989. With this new information, the police intercepted his motorboat and placed him on one side of the 2 Colombian military helicopters prepared for the offensive. At noon on December 15, 1989, 22 policemen, 17 of whom were from the elite police, boarded the 2 artillery helicopters and flew over El Tesoro, a village between Coveñas and Tolu, where the police were told that Gacha was hidden. The police demanded that Rodriguez Gacha surrender via a loudspeaker. But Gacha and his men disguised themselves as farm workers, and they patiently waited for the police to withdraw. Still, the 2 helicopters kept flying over the zone. When the fugitives got an opportunity, they ran to a red truck parked near the village and drove away, but they were immediately pursued by the police. After several unsuccessful attempts to escape from the police, Freddy Gonzalo, armed with a 9mm pistol, Gilberto Rendon, and 3 other bodyguards got off the truck and, while running towards a group of trees, engaged in a shootout with one of the aircraft, during which 2 of the fugitives were killed by a burst of the helicopter-mounted machine gun. The helicopter then landed with 5 elite policemen engaging in another shootout with the remaining fugitives, 2 bodyguards, and Freddy Gonzalo. They couldn't survive it. Meanwhile, the other helicopter was chasing the truck with Gacha and one of his men inside. When another police patrol appeared ahead on the road, Gacha and his bodyguard stopped the truck, got out of it, and ran away into a banana plantation on the side of the road. The artillerymen opened fire to try to detect the fugitives' whereabouts on the plantation. Gacha, armed with a German submachine gun, slowed his pace when he tore his scalp while trying to get through a wire fence. Feeling trapped, he opened fire on the approaching aircraft with a submachine gun, inadvertently exposing his position. In response, the police unleashed a burst of machine gun fire from their helicopter, hitting him in the leg and causing him to collapse. Moments later, he was fatally shot in the face, and his last bodyguard met a similar fate shortly afterward. The neighbors deduced from the sound of grenades and the damages to his face that El Mexicano had died by suicide by detonating a grenade against his head. However, police confirmed that he died from a bullet, citing the destructive effect of a large caliber bullet and the fact that El Mexicano's hands were not damaged, which would have been the case if he had detonated a grenade. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Mob Boss, and hit the notification button for more thrilling true stories. The Ochoa Brothers, founding fathers of terror. The Ochoa brothers were 3 siblings: Juan David Ochoa Vasquez, born in 1946, Jorge Ochoa Vasquez, born in 1950, and Fabio Ochoa Vasquez, born in 1957. They were instrumental in establishing the Medellin Cartel alongside Escobar and Letter. Their family ties provided them with both strength and vulnerability. Originating from Medellin, they grew up in a wealthy family of cattle breeders and ranch owners, locally known for owning a Medellin-based restaurant, La Margarita. It was through the youngest brother's trip to Miami, Florida, during the 1970s, that the brothers ventured into the world of drug trafficking. As the Medellin Cartel made some serious enemies, the kidnapping of the brothers' sister, Martha Neves Ochoa, by the far-left urban guerrilla movement M19 prompted the Ochoa brothers to establish Colombia's first paramilitary group, Death to Kidnappers, Muerta a Secuestradores. This group was formed on December 1st, 1989, and it brought together dozens of Colombian criminal leaders, members of the Colombian security establishment, politicians, and prominent businessmen, who pledged armed men and important financial support to combat the M19 movement. Under Jorge Ochoa's command, the paramilitary group quickly obtained Martha Neves Ochoa's release. Nevertheless, Muerte a Secuestradores became more than just a vigilante group, as it intensified its operations against M19 by torturing and killing dozens of the movement's leaders. Its activities expanded to target other far-left groups, including the FARC, leading to the assassination of over 300 demobilized officers. As the Medellin Cartel became a target for U.S. law enforcement, the Ochoa brothers drew attention through the assassination of Barry Seal, a DEA informant, on February 19, 1986. Facing prosecution for drug trafficking by U.S. courts and fearing extradition, the brothers surrendered to Colombian authorities in January 1991. Thanks to the terms offered by the then-president Cesar Gaviria, 1990 to 1994, they were released in July 1996. However, while the criminal careers of the elder brothers, Juan, David, and Jorge, concluded here, Fabio Ochoa decided to resume his activities. Consequently, he was arrested again in 1999 and extradited to the U.S. in September 2001, where he was sentenced to a 30-year term at the Federal Correctional Institution, Jessup, in Georgia. Now, aged 66, Fabio Ochoa was set to be released in September 2024, but a recent decision by the U.S. Justice has postponed his release until 2025. The stories of Carlos Letter, Jose Rodriguez Gacha, and the Ochoa brothers illustrate the complex dynamics within one of history's most infamous drug cartels. As we reflect on their legacies marked by bloodshed, violence, greed, betrayal, and ultimately downfall, we must ask ourselves, what lessons can be learned from this dark chapter? How do we ensure that history does not repeat itself? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. For more insights into the world of mob bosses and organized crime, click on the videos on your screen now. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and stay updated on our latest content.
You don't like them? No.
Think the Colombian drug cartels vanished with Pablo Escobar? Think again. Today's drug lords are smarter, richer, and more ruthless than ever. Unlike Escobar, they operate in total secrecy, building billion-dollar empires that stretch across the globe. So, who are these shadowy figures running the Colombian underworld in 2025? And how have they stayed one step ahead of law enforcement? Stay tuned, because what we're about to uncover will change everything you thought you knew about modern organized crime. Darrow Antonio Usaga David, alias Otonio. If you follow the drug trade, you probably heard the story of Darrow Antonio Usuga, better known as Otonio. He was the leader of Clan del Golfo, the most powerful criminal organization in Colombia. The world thought his story ended in 2021 when he was captured and extradited to the United States. But here's the shocking truth. His organization is still very much alive. Even though Otonio is behind bars, his cartel is still one of the most dominant forces in the global drug trade. His lieutenants have taken over, and rumors suggest that he still communicates with them from his high-security prison cell. The Clan del Golfo controls huge portions of Colombia's cocaine routes, smuggling drugs into the U.S., Europe, and beyond. They have military-grade weapons, deep government connections, and more money than ever. The real question is, was capturing Otonio even a victory? Because the Clan del Golfo didn't die with his arrest, it just adapted. Some say it's even stronger now than it was before. El Contador, the shadow financier of the Gulf Clan. Some drug lords rule with violence, others rule with money. Jorge Eliezer Cordoba Garzon, better known as El Contador, is the kind of boss who doesn't need to pull the trigger, because he owns the people who do. Once a low-level accountant, El Contador rose through the ranks of the Clan del Golfo, handling the group's finances and ensuring billions in drug profits were laundered cleanly through businesses, banks, and offshore accounts. His expertise made him untouchable. He was never in the field, never in the shootouts, never on the cartel's front lines. While others took the risks, he quietly counted the money, stacking fortunes so massive they couldn't fit in Escobar's legendary bank vaults. In 2025, despite major crackdowns on the Clan del Golfo, El Contador remains a free man. He's rumored to be operating from Panama or Venezuela, continuing to control the cartel's financial empire. Authorities claim that dismantling the Gulf Clan is impossible as long as he remains active. Without him, their financial operations would come to a halt, and if the money stops, the whole operation crumbles. La Oficina de Envigado, the silent masters of Medellin. Medellin will always be linked to the drug trade, but the Medellin Cartel isn't in charge anymore. Instead, it's La Oficina de Envigado, the criminal organization that once served as Escobar's enforcement arm. Over the years, the group transformed into something much bigger, a sophisticated mafia that runs the underworld in Medellin. Unlike traditional cartels, La Oficina de Envigado is no longer reliant on drugs. They control everything: extortion, money laundering, contract killings, and even legitimate businesses. They have deep connections in politics, law enforcement, and international crime networks. Rumors suggest that their current boss, whose identity remains a mystery, has deep ties to both local politicians and international crime syndicates. Their leader remains unknown, and that's exactly how they want it. They don't want to make the mistake Escobar did. They keep a low profile, move money quietly, and eliminate threats before they become a problem. Fabian, the butcher of Buenaventura. Some call him a businessman, others call him a warlord. To the people of Buenaventura, he's known as El Carnicero, the butcher. The port city of Buenaventura is one of the most important drug trafficking hubs in the world. Whoever controls it controls billions in cocaine shipments flowing from Colombia to the United States and Europe. And in 2025, the man in charge is Fabian Ramirez, a violent cartel leader who rose to power through sheer brutality. Unlike older cartel bosses, Fabian doesn't hide behind lawyers or politicians. He rules Buenaventura the old-fashioned way, by eliminating anyone who stands in his way. Entire neighborhoods have been turned into ghost towns under his rule. Rivals don't just disappear. They're turned into examples and used as warnings to others who might dare to cross him. But Fabian isn't just a killer. He's a strategist. By forging alliances with Mexican cartels and European mafia networks, he transformed Buenaventura into the most profitable drug corridor in Colombia. His operations are so well coordinated that even Colombian special forces struggle to infiltrate his territory. Despite international efforts to capture him, Fabian remains untouchable. Some say he never stays in the same place twice. Others say he doesn't need to, because his empire runs itself. Los Rastrojos, the ruthless smugglers. If you think of the drug trade as a war, then Los Rastrojos are the elite special forces. This criminal organization controls some of the most strategic smuggling routes in Colombia. Unlike other cartels that rely on corruption and connection, Los Rastrojos use brutal violence and military tactics to stay ahead. They're known for their paramilitary background, their alliances with Mexican cartels, and their ability to completely disappear from law enforcement's radar. While other groups get taken down by international coalitions, Los Rastrojos continues operating under the radar. Some say their current leader is one of the most dangerous figures in the underworld. Unlike Escobar, he doesn't do interviews. He doesn't buy soccer teams. He doesn't even have a known face. Yet, he controls an empire that stretches from the jungles of Colombia to the streets of Europe. Take a moment to subscribe to Mob Boss and smash that like button. Your support helps us uncover more secrets from the underworld. El Cazador, the hitman who became a kingpin. Most cartel bosses start as drug traffickers. El Cazador started as a hitman, and he was the best in the business. Real name, Hector Ramirez, El Cazador earned his nickname, The Hunter, by eliminating dozens of high-profile targets in the 2000s. His kills were so precise that some believed he had military training. Unlike other Cesarios, he never left behind evidence, and he never failed a contract. Eventually, his reputation became too big to ignore. Instead of working for cartel bosses, he became one. In 2025, El Cazador leads one of the deadliest assassin networks in Colombia, offering his services to drug lords, politicians, and even foreign criminal organizations. His network of elite hitmen operates in Colombia, Mexico, and Spain, making him one of the most feared figures in organized crime. The scariest part, he still personally carries out assassinations. If he considers you a high-value target, he won't send his men. He'll do it himself. No one's seen his face in over a decade. His only message to his enemies? Sleep with one eye open. El Lobo, the cartel general. If Colombian drug cartels had a military, El Lobo would be their top general. A former Special Forces soldier, El Lobo, Spanish for the wolf, was trained by the Colombian government to fight drug traffickers. But like so many others before him, he eventually switched sides, bringing his tactical knowledge to the very cartels he was once assigned to destroy. In 2025, he's the mastermind behind cartel military operations. His strategies have turned Colombia's underworld into a war zone. He introduced guerrilla warfare tactics to cartel soldiers, trained hit squads in urban combat, and even developed escape routes designed to outmaneuver law enforcement. When a rival cartel moves against him, they don't just face armed thugs, they face a well-disciplined army. Police raids fail because El Lobo anticipates their every move. Assassins sent to eliminate him end up disappearing themselves. The scariest part is that no one knows what he looks like. Unlike Escobar, who embraced the spotlight, El Lobo has never been photographed. The only proof of his existence is the devastation he leaves behind. El Tigre, the jungle's most feared drug lord. The deep jungles of DeMeo and Caqueta are a battlefield, home to guerrilla fighters, paramilitary groups, and cartel soldiers. And at the center of it all is El Tigre, the tiger. A former FARC rebel commander, Ricardo El Tigre Montoya, stayed in the drug trade even after the guerrilla group signed peace agreements. Instead of laying down his weapons, he built a new narco army, one that operates with brutal discipline and extreme violence. His cartel doesn't just move cocaine, it controls the entire production process, from coca plantations to jungle refineries, ensuring that no one interferes with his billion-dollar operation. Unlike urban cartels, El Tigre's army fights like guerrillas, ambushing police, using landmines, and even shooting down helicopters. In 2025, he's one of the most wanted men in Colombia. Yet his jungle hideouts make him impossible to attack. Authorities know that taking him down will require a full-scale military operation. The question is, will they risk the war that comes with it? La Serpiente, the drug queen of the Andes. Men rule the drug trade, or at least that's what most people think. But in the Andean regions of Colombia, one woman controls it all. Her name? Isabella La Serpiente Cruz. Unlike most cartel bosses, La Serpiente didn't rise through violence. She outsmarted her rivals. As a brilliant strategist, she built an empire by controlling key smuggling routes through the Andes, ensuring that her cocaine reaches international markets with zero interference. Her genius lies in her network of informants. She knows what the police are planning before they do. DEA operations against her have failed multiple times, simply because she's always one step ahead. Her nickname, the Serpent, comes from her ability to strike without warning. Rivals who underestimate her often meet their fate in accidents, car crashes, plane failures, even sudden heart attacks. La Serpiente is currently one of the richest figures in the Colombian underworld. The problem? No one can prove she's a criminal, because on paper, she's just a philanthropist. La Viuda Negra, the Black Widow of Colombia. You don't often hear about female cartel bosses, but when you do, they're some of the most dangerous figures in the underworld. Maria Camila Reyes, better known as La Viuda Negra, is living proof. Once the wife of a powerful cartel boss, Maria was never expected to lead. But when her husband was assassinated in 2018, she didn't fade into the shadows. She took over. Within months, every rival who had a hand in his death met the same fate. Some were shot, others were poisoned. A few simply vanished, their bodies never found. La Viuda Negra controls one of the most ruthless crime cartels in Colombia, specializing in drug trafficking, human smuggling, and illegal gold mining. Authorities believe she has direct ties to high-ranking government officials, allowing her to evade capture time and time again. And with every passing year, she only grows richer and more untouchable. Before we move on, don't forget to subscribe to Mob Boss and hit the thumbs up button. You won't want to miss our future deep dives into the world of organized crime. El Arquitecto, the mastermind of Medellin. If there's one city that's always been at the heart of Colombia's drug trade, it's Medellin. And in 2025, one man pulls the strings behind the scenes, a criminal mastermind known only as El Arquitecto. Unlike traditional cartel leaders, El Arquitecto doesn't carry a gun. He doesn't run street operations. He doesn't even step foot in the slums. His power comes from something far more valuable: intelligence. As a former banker, El Arquitecto is an expert in money laundering, bribery, and international trade. His cartel doesn't just sell drugs. They own the infrastructure that makes drug trafficking possible. Through legitimate companies, they control shipping ports, trucking firms, and logistics hubs. When cocaine is smuggled out of Colombia, it moves through his networks. When bribes are paid to corrupt officials, they come from his accounts. When police need information on rival cartels, they unknowingly get it from his spies. Some call him the Jeff Bezos of the underworld, not because he's the richest, but because he's built a global empire that no one can compete with. El Aguila, the smuggler who outsmarted the DEA. Cartels focus on cocaine. El Aguila focuses on something even more valuable: moving it without getting caught. Real name, Julio Cesar Pardo. El Aguila, the Eagle, is a legendary smuggler who revolutionized narco-logistics. His cartel doesn't produce drugs. Instead, it specializes in transportation, using high-tech methods to ensure that shipments reach their destinations undetected. Some of his tactics include custom-built submarines that can travel from Colombia to Spain without surfacing, hacked cargo ships that change their routes in the middle of the ocean, bribing airport security to allow suitcases filled with liquid cocaine. Authorities have tried to shut down his network for years, but he's always ahead of them. Every time the DEA develops a new tracking method, he finds a way around it. In 2025, his smuggling routes extend to Asia, the Middle East, and even Australia. He has no army, no sicarios, and no need for violence. His only weapon is his brilliant logistics. El Doctor, the cartel's silent puppet master. Most cartel bosses rely on bullets to get what they want. El Doctor prefers something more powerful: laws, bribes, and political influence. Once a respected lawyer, Carlos Andres Velez, better known as El Doctor, was the man powerful drug lords called when they needed to get out of trouble. His talent, making criminal charges disappear. Over the years, he realized that his legal knowledge could be used for more than just defending cartel bosses. It could be used to control them. By 2025, El Doctor has moved far beyond the courtroom. He's now the invisible hand behind multiple cartels, orchestrating their rise and fall like a chess game. He no longer represents one organization. Instead, he acts as a cartel consultant, advising multiple factions on how to avoid law enforcement, where to launder money, and even how to negotiate alliances with corrupt politicians. What makes him truly terrifying is that he has no known criminal record. He moves freely between Colombia, Spain, and Panama, attending high-class events while drug lords take orders from him. And if a cartel refuses to listen, a legal loophole suddenly lands them in prison or 6 feet under. El Fantasma, the ghost of the Cali cartel. Every criminal empire has a boogeyman, a figure so elusive that law enforcement questions whether he even exists. In Colombia, that man is El Fantasma, the ghost. No one knows his real name. Some believe he's a relative of the Rodriguez or Ajuela brothers, the original founders of the Cali cartel. Others say he's a former cartel accountant who vanished before the organization collapsed. Little is known about him. No photos, no fingerprints, no voice recordings. The only thing police have are whispers, stories from informants who claim to have seen him but can never prove it. What's certain is that in 2025, he controls a network of high-level traffickers who still operate under the Cali cartel's old business model: low violence, high intelligence, and complete secrecy. According to intelligence reports, El Fantasma runs a secretive cartel that specializes in high-risk, high-reward smuggling operations. He moves cocaine using submarines, unmanned drones, and hacked shipping containers that disappear from tracking systems. His routes extend to Asia, the Middle East, and even Africa, regions that most cartels haven't been able to penetrate. Every time authorities get close, he vanishes. Drug shipments linked to him never leave a trace. Assassins sent to kill him never return. Even rival cartel bosses fear him because they don't know what he looks like. In 2025, El Fantasma remains the biggest mystery in the Colombian underworld, and if he's real, he might just be the most dangerous cartel boss in history. El Viejo, the last of the old school bosses. Before the Gulf Clan, before the Mexican cartels, before the rise of new generation drug lords, there was El Viejo. Real name was Gustavo Ortega. El Viejo was a survivor of the Escobar era. While most of his rivals died in the 90s, he adapted, switching from large-scale drug trafficking to investment-based crime. He now owns banks, hotels, and real estate across Colombia, Panama, and the Dominican Republic. His money laundering network is so sophisticated that even authorities admit they don't know how much he's worth. The reason he's still relevant in 2025? Everyone owes him money. Next-generation cartel bosses borrow from him, using his financial network to move their cash. Even corrupt politicians fear him, knowing that a single word from him could expose their dirty dealings. El Viejo doesn't need to kill people anymore. If you cross him, he won't send hitmen, he'll bankrupt you. How do these bosses stay untouchable? The biggest difference between the Mafia bosses of today and those of the past, they've learned from history. Here's how they stay one step ahead in 2025 despite global scrutiny. 1. Technology. Modern cartels use encrypted messaging, blockchain transactions, and even artificial intelligence to track enemies and avoid law enforcement. They no longer rely on couriers or paper trails. 2. Diversification. Cocaine is still their primary product, but they've expanded into illegal mining, human trafficking, and cybercrime. Some of these organizations even run scams that steal millions from banks and governments worldwide. 3. Corruption. Money talks, and cartels have more of it than ever. They control key government officials, police officers, and even military personnel. In some areas, they are the law. 4. No publicity. Unlike Escobar and the old-school, flashy cartel leaders, today's Mafia bosses don't seek fame. They don't want to be on magazine covers or Netflix shows. They want to be invisible. That's how they survive. What's next for Colombia's Mafia in 2025? Despite their power, the Colombian Mafia faces new challenges in 2025. International coalitions are cracking down harder than ever, and rival factions are constantly fighting for control. But if history has taught us anything, it's that the Mafia always finds a way to survive. Whether it's adapting to new technologies or forming alliances, these criminal empires aren't going anywhere anytime soon. But how long can they keep their power? Governments around the world are using new tactics, new surveillance technology, and international coalitions to hunt them down. And here's something to think about. If law enforcement ever does take down these modern-day Mafia bosses, will they truly end organized crime, or will they just make way for an even smarter and more ruthless generation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to know more about the mob boss world, click on the videos on your screen now. And don't forget to subscribe to Mob Boss. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. What comes to your mind when you hear the words Pablo Escobar? Perhaps you may think, the king of cocaine. Well, you're not wrong, but one thing's clear. Escobar didn't rise to the top of the global drug trade on his own. Behind him stood a fearsome army of hitmen, or sicarios, willing to kill, bomb, and terrorize anyone at his command. The question to ask is, who were they? Welcome to Mob Boss. Today, we'll explore the underworld, uncovering the brutal pasts and complex legacies of the most notorious assassins of Escobar's reign. Pablo Escobar reigned as Colombia's drug kingpin in the late 1980s and early 1990s. He controlled a drug empire worth over $30 billion. To maintain his control, Escobar had a large network of sicarios who served as his bodyguards and assassins. In order to secure Escobar's rule and expand his empire, these men did whatever was necessary. They went to the extreme and did whatever Pablo asked of them, including assassinations, kidnapping, and any other thing you can think of. Escobar's motto was simple: plata o plomo, silver or lead. Take the bribe, or else you get the bullet. Loyalty was the ultimate virtue for many of his hitmen, and insubordination was a sure way to get killed. Even though Escobar's story was brought to a close in 1993, several of his notorious killers are still alive today. Some still struggling with crime, while some repentance and some vengeance. Who are these men, and what did they do when the Medellin cartel was at its peak? Yanero Velasquez Vasquez, alias Popeye. Although he passed away in 2020, This list wouldn't be complete without Juan Huero Velázquez Vázquez. Popeye remains one of the most notorious and deadly hired killers for the Colombian Medellin Cartel. He accumulated a record of over 300 heinous murders and ordered thousands of other killings as well. He was involved in most of Escobar's dangerous operations. Popeye's most well-known event was the bombing of Avianca Flight 203 in 1989. The target was a presidential candidate who Escobar considered a threat. The plan was simple: to get rid of a political rival. How to go about it? Blow up the plane he was to board. The Moscow-bound plane had 107 passengers and crew members on board when it exploded mid-air shortly after takeoff. Popeye was involved in the planning and implementation of this heinous act. The deaths of innocent people had wide-ranging effects on Colombia and the world at large. This was one of the worst incidents carried out by the cartel. Popeye assassinated several politicians, judges, and journalists at Pablo's command. He also assisted in the kidnap of other high-profile people, such as journalist Diana Turbay, who died in a rescue mission. Popeye's misdeeds reached different areas and many people. The violence he brought to Colombia is even felt to this very day. In 1992, he was arrested, and he was in jail for more than 2 decades. After being released from prison, Popeye came back in search of attention by posting articles about his criminal life online. While at times he said sorry, it was felt he wanted to be famous more than to be sorry. He died of cancer in 2020, but the consequences of his criminal actions remain historical. Carlos Mario Alzate Urquijo, alias El Arite. El Arite was one of the most ruthless hitmen for the Medellin Cartel under Pablo Escobar in the 1980s and early 1990s. He was one of Escobar's most loyal hitmen. He played a role in most of the terrorizing murders that took place in Colombia. Contrary to the other henchmen, El Arite had a special purpose. This was to get rid of anyone who could weaken the cartel. These included politicians, judges, journalists, and law officers who dared to stand up to Escobar's empire. One of the most popular of his operations was the assassination of Colombian presidential candidate Luis Carlos Galán in 1989. He was a loud anti-drug cartel leader and a staunch supporter of extradition. Galán was assassinated in a political campaign, and El Arite played an important role in implementing the plot. This high-profile murder demonstrated to everyone the cartel's readiness to deal ruthlessly with anyone who dared oppose him. El Arite was also involved in mass casualty terror attacks, including the bombing of Avianca Flight 203 in 1989, in which 107 people died. It was an attack Escobar had ordered because he thought a rival was on the plane. This was clear evidence of the cartel's lack of regard for human lives and an indicator of how lethal El Arite was. Within the cartel, El Arite engaged in cleansing operations, assassinating those deemed disloyal to the cartel. His efficiency in killing earned him the tag Ruthless Killer. This efficiency made him popular within the ranks of Escobar. El Arite's rule was that of fear and violence. He ensured the exploits of the Medellin Cartel's dominance were spread far and wide in Colombia. If you like this piece, please give it a thumbs up and tap the subscribe button so you can catch all our future pieces. Dandeni Munoz Mosquera, alias La Kika. Dandeni Munoz Mosquera was one of Pablo Escobar's most deadly hitmen in the cartel. He was Escobar's angel of death. He executed innumerable homicides, so much so that he became one of Pablo's most lethal assassins. Laquisa is probably best known for being implicated in the bombing of Avianca Flight 203 in 1989. This was one of the worst acts of violence in the history of Colombia, which caused a stir around the world. Despite his non-confession and being involved in the incident, Laquisa was tried and convicted in the United States. He's currently serving multiple life sentences. In addition to this attack, Laquisa committed many murders. He shot police officers, politicians, and anyone else who was against the empire of Escobar. His methods were brutal, often involving shootings, bombings, and other forms of violence meant to send a message. He was reported to have said that to cross the Medellin Cartel, it meant death. His loyalty to Escobar made him unstoppable, and he turned into a figure of fear and violence. The deadly activities of Laquisa were brought to an end when he was arrested in New York City in 1999. Though he's locked up today, his story is still a horror story of the Medellin Cartel's reign of crime that terrorized Colombia during one of the country's worst phases. As described by his defense lawyer, Laquisa is a ghost and was one of the many victims of the FBI war against the Medellin Cartel in the 1990s. Laquisa has always insisted he was not involved in the Avianca bombing, but was framed. In any case, the imprisonment proves that Escobar's violence was far greater than most of us could ever fathom. So, unlike some of his peers, Laquisa remains in jail. Luis Carlos Aguilar, alias El Mugre. Nicknamed The Filth, Luis Carlos Aguilar was one of Pablo Escobar's most dangerous contract killers. El Mugre was involved in so many murders that he left the entire country in fear and violence. His nickname depicted the terror and bloodshed he was creating for the cartel. El Mugre was particularly assigned to conduct contract killings of individuals threatening Escobar's drug business and organization. His targets were particularly politicians, policemen, and anyone who dared challenge the Medellin Cartel. There was no distinction in his targets. He could target politicians, judges, journalists, or even other drug lords, for that matter, with a lot of ease. The goal was simple: erase any form of resistance and create a message that Escobar was unstoppable. Another thing El Mugre is known for is the tactic of motorcycle assassinations, a very fast killing method that would become the hallmark of cartel's actions. People were killed in full view of the sun, with no regard for people's security. These murders were done openly, especially in well-busy areas of town. And this was a message to pass to anybody who dared to challenge the cartel. El Mugre was also involved in bombings and massive attacks that Escobar carried out. This is why he was willing to create chaos and fear in order to enforce the cartel's deadly agenda. For him, murder was not a job. No, it was a means of asserting dominance and passing a message. However, similar to other hitmen working for Escobar, El Mugre was not a forgiving man. This makes him a notorious figure in the cartel that embraced and encouraged violence and the act of killing. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison and then disappeared from public. According to reports from 2017, he may be living in Spain under a false identity, working in Murcia as a priest. Carlos Leder Rivas. Carlos Leder Rivas was one of the most mysterious of the mysterious. He was co-leader of the Medellin Cartel alongside Escobar. Since Leder entered into the drug business, his goal has been as dark as it was unyielding. He didn't merely distribute drugs. He helped create an industry worth several billions of US dollars. Leder turned Norman's Cay into a stronghold of crime. He made it into a base where planes filled with cocaine soared toward the United States. He helped leave entire populations marred by drug dependency and hopelessness. But this was just the beginning of the trafficking. Leder presided over tyranny and acts of serious violence and killings. Opponents disappeared. People who had seen something ceased to exist. And enemies of the empire ended up dead. He was a true follower of violence. Murders were not just an instrument of self-defense, but a sign of his authority. He helped with calculated murders that painted Colombia red. Judges, politicians, and police officers were targeted as if they were game. Leder's dedication and propensity for violence made even the cartel worse as he plunged it to its darkest levels. He had a need for violence and death, and he craved authority, which, in the end, was just a detriment. In 1987, Leder was caught, but his crimes cannot be erased from history. Fabio Ochoa Vasquez. Fabio Ochoa Vasquez was second only to Pablo Escobar in the cartel's bloody rule of cocaine. He was a child of wealthy parents and a second-born son. Yet, he loved power and had an unquenchable thirst for it. Fabio and his brothers orchestrated a drug empire, spreading terror and trafficking illicit substances across continents. But it was a perfect disguise, as the hands that lay beneath the image were drenched in blood. Fabio was known for his ruthless and methodical brutality. During the time of Escobar, Fabio was instrumental in using the cartel's fury against anyone who posed a challenge to their operations. Some of his evil deeds include the alleged murder of an ex-cartel pilot turned police informant, Barry Seal. On February 19, 1986, Seal was gunned down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This was a public spectacle meant to send a bone-chilling message to all who dared cross the Medellin Cartel. The blood spilled extended beyond single acts of reprisal. Fabio's loyalty to Escobar marked him as a co-conspirator in a network of violence that eliminated journalists, law enforcement officials, political figures, and civilians caught in the crossfire. Those who stood against the cartel often met a brutal, swift end. Bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings served as tools of fear, keeping the populace and rivals in check. Despite his later denials and attempts to distance himself from these crimes, Fabio's legacy remains a sinister testament to the Medellin Cartel's reign. Even within the darkness that enveloped Colombia during that era, Fabio Ochoa Vazquez emerged as a symbol of unrelenting bloodshed, a man for whom murder was simply business in the empire of death he helped build. Fabio is still alive and in prison in the United States. He was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison in 2003 after being extradited from Colombia in 2001. His release was originally planned for September 2024. However, it's been rescheduled for 2025. Jorge Luis Ochoa Vazquez. Jorge Luis Ochoa Vazquez always remained in the background of the Medellin Cartel. However, he was a man of considerable influence among the most prominent Colombian narcotics barons, working hand in hand with Pablo Escobar. Ochoa was not as popular as Escobar, but he was an important figure in the cartel. As a co-founder of the OCG, he was directly involved and responsible for the coordination and movement of enormous amounts of cocaine to world markets. This earned him immense riches while spreading fear. There's more that could be said about Ochoa beyond the surface of logistics and operational genius. He was a man fully enmeshed in the cartel's cycle of violence. Ochoa was accused of cold-blooded murders and using hitmen to assassinate those who crossed the cartel's path. He ordered the deaths of many politicians, judges, and law enforcement officials to deter anyone from interrupting the system they were running. His preferred tool was fear, and he used it at a whim. Ochoa not only approved business-related decisions, he authorized violence that left corpses in the streets. Stories of horrific killings at Ochoa's behest circulated widely. He orchestrated dead-end shootouts, vehicles filled with explosives blowing up in populated areas, and loved ones being killed. Ochoa was primed for action to the very end. He surrendered to Colombian authorities in 1991 and served a 5-year prison sentence. He was released in 1996. Since then, he's been residing in Medellin and has remained out of the public eye. Roberto de José Escobar Gaviria, alias El Osito. Working for the Medellin Cartel as its accountant under the name El Osito, or in real life as Roberto de Jesus Escobar Gaviria, he played far more than the role of an accountant for the Medellin Cartel. Behind the simple nickname was a man well wired into an extensive world of blood, cocaine, and death. Even though his brother, Pablo Escobar, took center stage as a visible symbol of terror, the blood on his hands was not spotless. Roberto was responsible for much of the cartel's financial structure, but his chore was much more significant than overseeing financial matters. He was an organizer who made sure the mechanism of death and drugs worked smoothly. Each dollar he counted supplied assassinations and specific killings that made Colombia live in constant fear. Roberto himself was no stranger to guiding death from behind the scenes. He was also accused of being directly involved in directing hits against those who tried to voice their displeasure within the organization. Even after Roberto completed his prison sentence in 2006, his thug's history is far from silent. His hands sits on the steering wheel of the Medellin Cartel's bloody legacy. Beyond his notorious past, Roberto has ventured into various enterprises, including the founding of Escobar Inc., a company dedicated to managing the Escobar's family assets. Before you go, show your support by hitting that thumbs up button and subscribing to our channel. We got plenty more captivating stories you won't want to miss. Each of these men played pivotal roles in the Medellin Cartel. contributing to its rise and facing the consequences of its fall. While some sought redemption, others struggled to leave behind a world of violence, power, and betrayal. Their stories serve as reminders of the human cost of the drug trade and the lasting impact it has on lives, families, and entire nations. The surviving hitmen of Pablo Escobar live on the thin line between being infamous and being given a second chance at life. Some have even gone the extra mile to look for fame, and there are those who will do anything to be forgotten. But their pasts are not at rest, and neither is Colombia. The violence they committed caused great suffering to Colombian society, which they are yet to recover from. Sadly, for some of the former Cesarios, it's been almost literally impossible to reintegrate into society. The major challenges are public opposition, threats from other drug cartels, and post-traumatic stress disorder arising from their previous activities. Some have tried to make a new start by coming forward to fight against violence, but their stories are normally received with doubts. The Colombian government has done much to break down the architecture of crime and deal with harm brought forth by Escobar. However, the existence of former hitmen still shows the impossibility of the concept of moving on in this story. Strategies that are aimed at advocating for peace, justice, and reconciliation come with the burden of history, a history of blood, betrayal, and lost lives. Pablo Escobar's hitmen are the historical artifacts of a violent period in social history. He's the type of man who committed indescribable things in the name of faithfulness, authority, and intimidation. Some have looked for a chance to be absolved, and others have disappeared. Their stories remain pertinent and tell us of the high price of war and how fleeting the light of peace is. Thanks for joining us on this journey. If you're hungry for more stories about crime legends and their hidden empires, click on the videos appearing on your screen. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the world of organized crime. See you next time. Two men, two empires of chaos. From the lush hills of Medellin to the unforgiving mountains of Sinaloa, their names became synonymous with terror, wealth, and an insatiable lust for power. Pablo Escobar and Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, architects of unimaginable violence and fortune, left a permanent scar on the world. But when the dust settles, who truly stands as the worst of the worst? Welcome to Mob Boss, where we dive into the murky depths of history's most feared criminal masterminds. Today, we dissect the lives, legacies, and bloody paths of Escobar and El Chapo. Get ready. This isn't just a history, it's a battle of titans. If you're into tales of criminal empires and legends of the underworld, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Who do you think was more ruthless, Escobar or El Chapo? Stick around, there's more to uncover. Since the late 1970s, two men have risen to notoriety as the most powerful and dangerous drug lords in history, Pablo Escobar and Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The two men revolutionized the international drug business and became billionaires at the expense of bloodshed. While Escobar's rule ended on the roof of a building in Medellin in 1993, El Chapo's rule ended when he was extradited to the U.S. in 2017. However, they weren't always this way, or were they? Let's find out. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born on the 1st of December 1949 in Rio Negro, a town in the Antioquia department in Colombia. He was born in a very simple family in a rural area. His father, Abel de Jesus Dari Escobar Achaveri, was a farmer, and his mother, Hermilda Gaviria, was a school teacher. This modest beginning did little to hint at the empire of crime and wealth Escobar would go on to build, but it did shape aspects of his character that would later define him. Drive, tenacity, and a very positive sense of orientation in the environment. Pablo was born in the neighboring town of Medellin, which would later become the central point of his immense cocaine business. The young Pablo was intelligent and sly right from his childhood, though he was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Living in a country with such disparities and political instability, he was able to pick a number of survival strategies. Anecdotes from his childhood depict him as an individual who was very keen on climbing the ladder of success no matter what it takes. The young Escobar started practicing crime by stealing and smuggling. He allegedly used sandblasting to remove names on the tombstones and then sell them. He also engaged in black market cigarettes, counterfeit lottery tickets, and carjacking. These early criminal activities might have been petty, but they were enough to show that Escobar had what it takes to become a criminal mastermind and that he was not afraid to take chances. Year by year, he strengthened his circle and got connected with other criminals in Medellin, as well as understanding the structure of the city's underground world. The turning point in Escobar's life was the change in his career in the late 1970s from robbery to drug dealing. At the time, Colombia was entering the marijuana market, but Escobar realized that the new boom would be on cocaine. Cocaine was already known in the United States, and demand for it was rapidly increasing. The huge market that was available to him made Escobar think of creating a cocaine empire. Some of the early partners in the drug business that Escobar had were other people who later formed the core of the Medellin Cartel. Altogether, they created a highly developed logistics system which supplied coca leaves from Bolivia and Peru, processed them into cocaine in the laboratories in Colombia, and delivered the final product to the United States. The brutality of his business approach and his ideas distinguished Escobar from his counterparts in a short period. He used any opportunity he could get to transport his product, including bribing border personnel to build complex smuggling networks across Central America and the Caribbean. The upward mobility of Escobar was fast and forceful. By the early 1980s, he was rated among the world's wealthiest and most influential drug barons. His Medellin cartel was responsible for 80% of the world's cocaine, and his business was generating hundreds of millions of dollars each week. This enormous sum of money enabled Escobar to live lavishly and construct opulent estates such as the Hacienda Napoles, which came equipped with a zoo, a bull ring, and a mock colonial town modeled after the birthplace of the drug lord. On one hand, Escobar was living in luxury. On the other hand, he was portraying himself as a Robin Hood kind of figure. In Medellin's barrios, he constructed homes, schools, and soccer fields and gained the support of many poor Colombians. The duality of power, such as that of the drug lord and philanthropist, was another strength of his character. Some people of Medellin regarded him as a robber who stole from the rich and the poor, while others viewed him as a criminal because of his brutal methods. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications for more videos about the most intriguing people in history. Due to his power and wealth, Escobar had many problems with Colombian authorities. Thus, determined to guard his empire, he paid politicians, judges, and police officers bribes and threatened them with consequences if they did not do his bidding. He even attempted to join politics and was an alternate member of the Colombian Congress for some time. Nevertheless, his political aspirations and clear involvement in criminal activities exposed him to the government and international agencies, especially the United States. Since the Colombian government and its supporters began stepping up efforts to destroy the Medellin cartel, Escobar escalated violence to new heights. He planned bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings of anyone who dared to stand against him. The bloodshed brought him fame across the world and signaled the start of a war between the state and the cartel. However, the story of El Chapo, who started out as a poor farmer boy from the countryside in Sinaloa, Mexico, demonstrates ambition, ingeniousness, and ruthlessness. He rose from a simple peasant to one of the greatest, most fearsome bosses of his generation, commanding the so-called Sinaloa cartel that set significant changes in the flow of the drug trade in the world using lots of intelligent, frightful strategies. His real name is Joaquin Archivaldo Guzman Loera, and he's better known as El Chapo, which translates from Spanish as Shorty, although he's 5'6" tall. His birthplace was in the district of La Tutiapa in the Sierra Madre Mountains, where the population had already been involved with opium and marijuana cultivation, which provided the basis for the drug trade that dominated El Chapo's life. Sadly, Guzman's early years were one of poverty and violence. These are contributing factors that shaped him into one of the world's most influential drug barons. Jesus Guzman was born in a very poor family. His father, Emilio Guzman Bustillos, was alleged to have been engaged in cattle farming and had links with the drug barons. And his mother, Maria Consuela Lorea Perez, raised them. Living in La Tuna was extremely difficult, and Joaquin had to endure poverty and lack of food. He dropped out of school in the 3rd grade and started working in the fields to support his father and the family, where they grew poppies and marijuana, which are widely grown within that area. These experiences planted him early in the drug trade world and gave hints about what he was going to be in the future. There are numerous childhood stories of Guzman as a focused and ingenious child. He had a rather harsh childhood, but showed entrepreneurship and risk-taking skills. However, there were rumors that he had a bad relationship between him and his father. Joaquin's father was a violent man and often spent his money on drinks. Thus, young Joaquin had to support his brothers and sisters. This responsibility might have driven him to look for a better life at any cost whatsoever. He started marijuana peddling when he was in his early teens, growing it and selling it. He was very quick to prove himself as one of the most hard-working and trustworthy individuals. These qualities greatly assisted him in his rise through the ranks of the drug industry. Before he became a young man, he had linked up with other drug dealers in the region, including the godfather of the Mexican drug cartels, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. Gallardo was the godfather of the Guadalajara cartel, which was the biggest drug cartel in Mexico at the time, and he featured prominently in the training of Guzman. Under Gallardo's leadership, Guzman learned important skills that would later help him in his career: logistics, organization, and smuggling. The Guadalajara cartel was in charge of moving huge amounts of drugs from South America to the United States, and Guzman soon showed his worth. His stubbornness, readiness to use force, and creativity won him the admiration and respect from his comrades. By the time the Guadalajara cartel dissolved in the late 1980s, because of Gallardo's arrest, Guzman took the chance to assert himself. Guzman co-founded the Sinaloa cartel, which would one day be a dominant force in the global narcotics trade. His rise to the top involved both cutthroat steps and the ability to create new forms of doing business. While most of the competitors failed to realize the necessity of diversification and end-to-end control of the supply chain, Guzman was aware of that. He grew Sinaloa Cartel's business, not only limited to marijuana and heroin, but also cocaine and methamphetamine, organizing supply sources from Colombia and using complex ways to transport drugs into the United States. Guzman made one of his most important innovations in the drug business by using underground tunnels to transport drugs between Mexico and the USA. These tunnels were fitted with some of the most modern amenities, such as ventilation and lighting. Hence, they were perfect in the sense that law enforcement could hardly arrest the tunnel users. This creativity made Guzman and the Sinaloa cartel well known for being one move away from the officials. During his rise, Guzman also showed a remarkable talent for consolidating and maintaining power and cooperation. He coordinated with other drug dealers to forge power and authority, though he relied on different methods like offering incentives, threats, and force. He built a team of employees and associates that covered the entire world. Thus, the cartel was able to penetrate Central and South America, Europe, Asia, and other parts of the globe. Guzman controlled his empire all around the world, and he was one of the most dangerous drug lords who ever existed. Power meant lots of money. In the 2000s, Guzman became a billionaire and even ranked several times on the Forbes list of world's millionaires. He made his wealth through crime, and the Sinaloa cartel dominated the drug market across the globe. Guzman took advantage of the fact that with money, he could obtain protection and support from politicians, police, and the military in Mexico. He indulged in a vast corruption web for many years, which meant he enjoyed relatively free rein in his criminal activities. Nonetheless, Guzman's ascent to power was not smooth sailing at all. He was first apprehended in Guatemala in 1993 and sent to Mexico, where he was serving his sentence. However, the story of Guzman was again changed in 2001 when he fled from the high-security Puente Grande prison, allegedly using a laundry cart. This escape consolidated his myth and underlined his capacity to deceive and outwit tight security. For the next 13 years, Guzman continued to head the Sinaloa cartel, controlling drug trafficking, building his power base, and staying out of the hands of the police. His power increased. However, the level of criminal energy related to his cartel also rose. Mexico's drug war, which was partly driven by Guzman, saw over 100,000 people killed, with common occurrences being cartels fighting each other and attacks on police and rival gangs. He was, however, rearrested in 2014, but escaped again in 2015 through a mile-long tunnel that was built to his cell. This second escape made him even more of a legend in the world of mobsters and the world of crime. He was arrested in Mexico in January 2016 and was later handed over to the United States to stand trial for several charges, including drug trafficking, murder, and money laundering. Do you believe that El Chapo's tunnel escape was the best prison breakout ever? Leave your comment below and let's talk about the most incredible criminal escapes that have ever occurred. The life of El Chapo became a story of greed and determination to gain more and more power, together with a history of violence. Learned, cunning, and most of all, merciless, he started in the impoverished mountains of Sinaloa and rose to power as the leader of a billion-dollar empire. His legacy, nevertheless, is one of violence, corruption, and the human toll of the war on drugs, which he played a part in. Today, he's still in prison in the United States, but the echo of his life and criminal activities can still be felt across the globe. Forbes placed Pablo Escobar among the world's richest individuals from 1987 to 1993, putting his wealth somewhere north of $25 billion. Over the nearly 40 years of his armed conflict, Escobar ran his Medellin cartel on nearly every stage of the cocaine production and distribution, reaping fabulous revenue and cementing his grip on the global cocaine market. Escobar even went so far as to offer to pay off Colombia's national debt, proof of his rich wealth and his political ambitions. Forbes also listed Joaquin El Chapo Guzman with an estimated net worth of $1 billion. Unlike Escobar's communist cell, El Chapo's Sinaloa cartel was instead a sprawling, loose network of strongmen who were resilient and flexible. Guzman, though his personal wealth did not match Escobar's, had come close to never being apprehended in decades and succeeded in directing a capacious international drug empire from behind bars, thanks to his intelligence and clout. While markets reached throughout Africa, Asia, and the Americas, the Sinaloa's cartel operations proved to be flexible and wide-ranging. In this respect, both Escobar and Guzman used a lot of violence in order to stay in command. Escobar began an open conflict with the Colombian state and tried to kill judges, politicians, policemen, and journalists. He executed 2 ministers of justice, 4 presidential aspirants, and virtually countless Supreme Court judges. His violent methods were in full evidence in the bombing of a civilian aircraft that claimed the lives of 110 persons. Altogether, he killed approximately 10,000 people. The violence continued without a break from Escobar, who only wanted to avoid extradition to the U.S. and maintain his control over Colombia. El Chapo was brutal, but did not utilize his military on civilians and school children. It's said that he killed between 2,000 and 3,000 men. During his reign at the cartel, Sinaloa cartel was involved in many confrontations with other cartels, such as the Tijuana cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel. Guzman's cartel was involved in a gruesome act of violence. Its influence extended to the police and politicians. Still, Guzman never declared war against the Mexican state as Escobar did in Colombia. When Escobar was to be arrested, through his immense influence and fear of extradition to the United States, he negotiated a deal with the Colombian government in 1991, agreeing to surrender on the condition that he be imprisoned in a facility of his own design, known as La Catedral. This so-called prison was far from ordinary, featuring a soccer field, bar, jacuzzi, and lavish living quarters. In 1992, when the government realized he was using the prison as a base for his operations and had even tortured and killed rivals there, they attempted to move him to a more conventional facility. Anticipating the move, Escobar escaped, leading to a massive manhunt. This effort involved the collaboration of Colombian security forces and U.S. agencies. Escobar was eventually tracked down and killed in a shootout on a Medellin rooftop on December 2, 1993, marking the end of his reign. Guzman's escapes were equally legendary. In 2001, he escaped from a Mexico prison by hiding in a laundry cart. Recaptured in 2014, he escaped again in 2015 through a mile-long tunnel dug beneath his cell. His repeated escapes humiliated Mexican authorities and demonstrated his reach and influence. Guzman was finally recaptured in 2016 and extradited to the U.S., where he now faces life in prison. If you're enjoying this battle of the drug lords, give us a like and let us know who you think had the most brutal legacy. Both Escobar and Guzman cultivated public support through acts of charity and largesse. Escobar's Robin Hood image endeared him to many Colombians despite the violence he wrought. Guzman enjoyed similar support in Sinaloa, where his cartel provided employment and protection to local communities. This public backing made capturing both men difficult, as locals often shielded them from authorities. The legacies of these two drug lords differ in significant ways. Escobar's impact on Colombian society was profound, leaving scars that persist to this day. His story is unique, shaped by his ambition to control every aspect of the cocaine trade and his willingness to wage war on his own country. Guzman's Sinaloa cartel, while powerful, operates within a different context. The fragmented nature of Mexico's drug trade and the rise of competing cartels have diluted the influence of any single leader. While Guzman's cartel remains formidable, it faces ongoing challenges from rivals and internal divisions. Determining who's worse between Escobar and Guzman depends on the criteria used. Escobar's brutality, political influence, and ambition to dominate Colombia make him one of history's most notorious criminals. Guzman's global reach, adaptability, and ability to evade capture for decades demonstrate his cunning and ruthlessness. Both men inflicted immense suffering and left lasting legacies of violence and corruption. In the end, the title of worst may rest upon personal interpretation. Escobar's war against the Colombian state and his staggering death toll makes him a symbol of unchecked power and terror. Guzman's dominance of the global drug trade and his ability to escape justice highlights the ongoing challenge of combating organized crime. Both men represent the darkest aspects of the drug trade and its impact on society, and their stories serve as a stark reminder of the human cost of the drug war. As we come to the end of this gripping showdown between Pablo Escobar and El Chapo Guzman, it's clear that their legacies are steeped in power, violence, and tragedy that reshape nations and lives forever. But who do you think truly ruled the underworld? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of these infamous crime lords, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the bell notification so you never miss an episode on the Mob Boss channel. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, the line between power and downfall is razor thin. Thanks for watching.
He was the Cali Cartel's ghost, a man who was known to have laundered millions, buried his enemies alive, and vanished into thin air. But in 2008, Wilbert Varela, also known as the Soap King, was found dead and rotting in a Venezuelan safe house, sliced to pieces. Was this just an unfortunate end to a criminal kingpin, or a warning to anybody who would dare to trust the wrong ally? Stay with us, and we'll reveal how the truth is way bloodier than you think. Early years, the birth of J-Bon, and rise from poverty to power. Wilbert Varela's story began not in a mansion, but in the dirt. Born in the 1950s in Roldanillo, Valle del Cauca, Colombia, he grew up in a shack with no electricity. His father, a sugarcane farmer, died when Varela was 12, forcing him to sell soap door to door to feed his siblings. The nickname J-Bone, or Soap, stuck, but it was the only innocent thing about him. By 18, Varela was running errands for local smugglers, helping them to move contraband, cigarettes, and whiskey. But the real money was in the coca trade. In the 1970s, Colombia's coca fields exploded, and Varela joined the Traquetos, small-time cocaine processors. He was given the job of mixing coca paste with gasoline in hidden jungle labs. It was dirty, dangerous work, and it was his first taste of the drug trade. Everything changed for Varela in 1981. A rival smuggler had accused Varela of stealing some product. Instead of pleading or explaining, Varela slashed the man's throat with a machete. He sent out a message that day with that occurrence: cross him and you bleed. Local cartel scouts noticed, and by 1983 he was recruited by the Cali Cartel, who were also known as the Gentlemen of Cocaine. The Cali Cartel, led by the Rodriguez-Oruelo brothers, preferred discipline over Escobar's chaotic style. And Varela fit perfectly into their cartel. The first assignment he was entrusted with was the protection of a cocaine shipment headed to Panama. He succeeded by tossing a rival smuggler's body into a crocodile-infested river. Varela's rise as Cali's financial mastermind, while Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel was busy bombing police stations, the Cali cartel was bribing them. Varela was thriving in this shadow war. By 1985, he'd been promoted to launderer-in-chief of the cartel. His specialty was turning drug money into clean businesses, and he did it brilliantly in the following ways. Step 1. By buying legitimate companies. Varela purchased a shrimp export firm in Barranquilla. Step 2. Inflate company sales. He fabricated invoices claiming to ship 10 tons of shrimp monthly, but the real shipments were 1 ton. The extra revenue? Drug cash. Step 3. Expand globally. By 1989, he owned front companies in Panama, Mexico, and Miami, laundering $50 million monthly. But Varela's true genius was in narco-diplomacy. He bribed Colombian customs officials to ignore cocaine-filled shipping containers. A 1992 DEA memo noted Varela has compromised 70% of Colombia's port authorities. Even judges were on his payroll. When a prosecutor decided to investigate him, Varela would send a gift, a coffin with the man's photo inside. Soon after, the case would vanish. Before we reveal how Varela stole $200 million from his own cartel, support us by liking this video and smashing that subscribe button. This is the story YouTube doesn't want you to see: Varela and the dominance of the Cali Cartel. By 1990, the Cali Cartel controlled 80% of the global cocaine trade. Gilberto and Miguel Rodriguez-Oruelo ruled like CEOs, but Varela was the silent partner behind the scenes, whose role was to make their money untraceable. Operation Cornerstone, 1992, was the DEA's biggest Cali investigation that uncovered Varela's web. He'd bought 12 Miami apartment complexes, a Panama bank, and a Mexican casino. Agents traced $1.2 billion to him, but they couldn't arrest him. Why? They had no photos, no fingerprints, nothing to identify him with. The DEA nicknamed him the Ghost. Varela's ruthlessness kept him safe. In 1993, a cartel accountant threatened to flip. Varela invited him to a meeting in the Andes. The man was never seen again, except for his fingers, which were mailed to his wife in a soapbox. But in 1995, the cartel cracked. The Rodriguez brothers were arrested. Varela saw his chance and took everything. The $200 million heist and Varela's betrayal of the Rodriguez brothers. On July 4, 1995, the Rodriguez brothers were captured in Cali. Chaos followed soon after, but Varela stayed calm. He knew all the cartel's secrets, including Swiss bank accounts holding $200 million. Within 48 hours, he had drained them. How did he pull this off? He had spent years forging the brothers' signatures, preparing for this moment. The brothers, still ruling from prison, were furious when they found out. Gilberto Rodriguez ordered a hit on Varela. "I want his head in a box." A $30 million bounty was placed on him and attracted every assassin in South America. But Varela was already gone, fleeing to Venezuela with his fortune and a new identity as Alberto Gonzalez, a wealthy businessman. In Venezuela, he bribed his way to power. General Hugo Carvajal, later convicted of drug trafficking, gave him military protection. Varela even married Maria Gabriela Caceres, a former Miss Venezuela finalist, to blend into high society. By 2000, he controlled 70% of Venezuela's cocaine trade, shipping tons to Europe via West Africa. Varela's Venezuelan empire relied on narco-politics. He funded Hugo Chavez's 2000 re-election campaign, earning presidential favors. A leaked CIA report stated Varela is untouchable in Venezuela. He owns the government. If you'd like to know how Varela's empire crumbled, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to Mob Boss. More is still to come. The Norte del Valle Cartel. By the mid-1990s, after leaving the Cali cartel, Varela had become a trusted enforcer for Orlando Henao Montoya, a top leader of the emerging Norte del Valle cartel, the organization that arose as the Cali cartel crumbled. Colombian sources note that by 1993, Varela was head of security for Henao, overseeing his personal hit squad. In one dramatic encounter, narco-trafficker Javier Cale Serna, later known as Comba, recalled meeting Varela at a football match in Cali in 1993. From that day on, Varela recruited Cale Serna into his network of sicarios, or hitmen. Under Henao's wing, Varela built a reputation for ruthlessness. He survived an ambush on November 23, 1997 in Rosso near Cali. This assassination attempt was reportedly ordered by rival capo Helmer Pacho Herrera. Varela retaliated in blood. Herrera himself became one of Varela's first victims in this clash. The clash pulled the Herrera clan and the Henao faction into open conflict. Within months, Orlando Henao himself was killed in prison in November of 1998, allegedly as a retaliation for these attacks. With his boss eliminated, Varela stepped into the brand new gap created in Norte del Valle leadership. He now commanded a private army of hitmen loyal only to him. By the late 1990s, in the vacuum left by the Cali and Medellin cartels' collapse, the Norte del Valle organization grew stronger and handled a large portion of Colombia's cocaine exports. Sources would later call the cartel one of the most powerful cocaine trafficking operations in the country, with Varela emerging as one of its most ruthless bosses. Varela's rise in the Norte del Valle cartel. After Orlando Henao's death, Varela strengthened his power in the Norte del Valle region. By 2000, he was in command of hundreds of hitmen and labs, controlling key smuggling routes out of Colombia. U.S. and Colombian law enforcement soon took notice of this. In May 2004, a U.S. federal grand jury indicted all the Norte del Valle leaders, including Varela, under RICO statutes. The indictment bluntly declared that he was the head of Colombia's most powerful cocaine cartel, allegedly overseeing shipments of hundreds of tons of cocaine worth billions of dollars. The U.S. Department of State even placed a $5 million reward on his head, and he was listed as a top DEA most wanted fugitive. U.S. officials described Varela as considered extremely dangerous, and the Treasury called him a former assassin who rose to become a North Valley cartel leader by killing competing rival cartel leaders. Another press release labeled him outright an assassin-turned-drug lord, whose trafficking and lethal exploits ran through the cartel's coffers. Under Varela's command, the Norte del Valle cartel allegedly shipped $500 million of cocaine to the U.S. each year. An indictment noted the cartel had moved roughly 550 tons of cocaine, over $10 billion worth, between 1990 and 2004. Varela's organization was sure to call on all layers of illicit muscle. U.S. court documents explicitly warned that Norte del Valle traffickers, under Varela's sphere of influence, routinely enlisted ex-paramilitaries from the AUC to guard labs and secure smuggling routes. The cartel even forged corrupt ties with Colombian military and police officers. Colombian prosecutors later alleged, for instance, that a Colombian admiral once tipped off traffickers about U.S. Navy patrols, and that Army officers murdered police operatives on cartel orders. Through clever bribery and intimidation, Varela maintained a shadow network of protection while keeping rival cartels at bay. Yet within this shadow empire, tensions were growing. By the mid-2000s, the Norte del Valle cartel had split into warring factions. On one side stood Varela and his henchmen. On the other was Diego Leon Montoya Sanchez, alias Don Diego, another top boss with his own private army known as the Machos. Montoya and his clan had been allied rivals with Norte del Valle since the Cali Cartel era. Varela and Montoya's rivalry had deep roots, fueled in part by paranoia over reinstituted extradition policies. By 2002, the two factions would erupt in open warfare. The War of Spies and the Rise of Los Rastrojos. In early 2002, Varela took a deadly gamble that ignited the so-called War of the Spies. According to Colombian analysts, the conflict began when Varela ordered the assassination of a Montoya ally who was secretly cooperating with U.S. agents. This act triggered a tit-for-tat bloodbath. The first phase of the war, known as La Guerra de los Espías, claimed more than 1,000 lives, one study later summarized. Civilians, police, and mid-level narcos were routinely ambushed. Bogota's slums and the rural highways of Valle del Cauca became killing fields between rival Sicario squads. Facing a deadly stalemate, Varela's lieutenant Diego Perez Haneo, alias Diego Rastrojo, took the fight to the next level. In 2002, he founded an armed wing called Los Rastrojos as Varela's private army. Los Rastrojos absorbed many of Varela's enforcers and also recruited new gunmen to protect his labs and shipments. The U.S. Department of Justice described this expansion plainly. The Rastrojos first emerged in 2002 as the army wing for Wilber Varela, alias J-Bone, in the bloody struggle against Don Diego and his Machos. With the Rastrojos providing cover, Varela launched assaults on Montoya's cells across western Colombia. The cartel's networks of sicarios, or hitmen, caused a lot of trouble. Kidnappings, extortions, and public killings surged. In effect, Varela began treating the entire region as his personal war zone. He even flirted with incorporating some paramilitary militias. For a time, Los Rastrojos pretended to be Popular Peasant Patrols, or RCP, to join government peace talks with Colombia's demobilizing AUC paramilitary groups. The RCP name was dropped, but it underscored Varela's brazen tactics. Through the mid-2000s, each side struck major blows. Montoya's Machos killed hundreds of Rastrojos members. Varela retaliated by wiping out the whole Machos crew. Both cartels hijacked coca convoys, burned drug labs, and imposed taxes on local farmers. By 2006, Colombian experts estimate the feuding left well over 1,000 dead across Valle del Cauca, relatives of narcos, informers, and unlucky bystanders. Amid this chaos, the U.S. and Colombian governments relentlessly went after the top dogs. By 2007, the balance was shifting. Colombia mounted a major operation to round up drug kingpins. Late that year, Don Diego Montoya was arrested in the Colombian city of Cali. This dealt a huge blow to his faction. Simultaneously, Juan Carlos El Chupeta Ramirez, a notorious boss who had cooperated with Don Diego, was captured in Brazil. U.S. officials later noted that these arrests and related police actions had decimated the cartel's leadership, leaving Varela on top. In the words of Colombia's police chief at the time, Varela was in recent years the major boss of Colombian drug trafficking organizations, effectively the last of the big capos of Norte del Valle. At its height, under Varela's thumb, Los Rastrojos were believed to control much of western Valle del Cauca's cocaine trade. BBC News noted that after assassinating Varela's boss in 2008, Comba took over the drug smuggling routes and formed his own gang, the Rastrojos, which then ran much of the drug trafficking in the western Valle del Cauca province. Along with extortion and kidnapping, Varela seemed untouchable, but in such drug empires, power breeds paranoia and betrayal. Varela's betrayal from within. By 2005, Varela's paranoia consumed him. He trusted no one, not even his wife. He moved nightly between 12 safe houses, each stocked with cash, guns, and acid barrels for disposing of bodies. His security chief, Jose Gregorio Mendoza, later told police he'd shoot a man for sneezing too loud. By late 2007, cracks had formed inside Varela's organization. The very fighters he had armed, the twin gunmen Javier Comba, Cale Serna, and Diego Perez Haneo, began to drift away from his control. In a classic narco twist, Varela's ex-allies grew bold enough to turn on their leader. U.S. and Colombian police intelligence discovered that Comba had joined forces with another major trafficker, Daniel El Loco Barrera, against their old boss. Tensions peaked when Varela tried to curtail Comba and Perez Geneo's expansion into northern Colombia. Not surprisingly, they balked. Then came the final confrontation. In January 2008, Wilber Varela was lying low in a resort cabin in Merida, Venezuela, under an assumed name. He was effectively a fugitive, rumored to be sheltered by corrupt officials just across the border. But on January 30th, his luck ran out. Reports later revealed that Javier Calle Serna, or Comba, and Diego Perez Geneo, or Diego Rastrojo, walked into that very cabin and opened fire. A Venezuelan drug agent later said they identified Varela's body by fingerprints. It matched Wilber Varela. Officials found his corpse riddled with bullets, a horrible end for a man once called a gunpoint king. According to one report, the two bodies, Varela and his bodyguard, each had more than 7 bullet wounds. It was clearly no ordinary hit. The killers were professionals, seeking no mercy. Within days, Colombian police made it official. The bullet-riddled body of Varela had been conclusively proven to be the narco lord, said Venezuela's anti-drug chief. The DEA's $5 million reward now became stale news headlines. When word of the killing spread, U.S. and Colombian officials reacted with muted relief. The U.S. ambassador to Colombia called it good news that the world was rid of somebody who brought misery to millions of people. Colombian General Oscar Naranjo summed it up bluntly. "What has happened should be a blow to criminal organizations," he said. He is the last of the big capos of the Norte del Valle cartel. In other words, the death of Jabón signaled the end of an era. As one analyst noted, Varela's demise brings to an end the era of the 3 big Colombian cartels. With their kingpin gone and the organization bled dry by infighting, the Norte del Valle cartel shattered into splinter gangs. Even now, scholars and crime writers pieced together Varela's motives in those final hours. Some say he never saw the betrayal coming. Others suggest a power struggle among the Comba brothers left no room for the old boss. What is clear is the cold irony. The ruthless hitman ended up as a victim of a hit. Varela's legacy and the aftermath of his fall. The bullets that killed Wilber Varela in Venezuela also put a figurative bullet through the heart of the old Colombian narco model. Within weeks of his death, top Norte del Valle figures were captured. By 2008 to 2009, most of the remaining big fish from the Cali and Norte del Valle eras had been jailed or killed. Los Rastrojos, once his potent armed wing, fought on for a while but eventually splintered. The Rastrojos leaders, including the Comba brothers, were later hunted down or apprehended. Meanwhile, Colombia's government took advantage of the situation. Subsequently, the U.S. sanctioned every remnant of Varela's work. Colombian and U.S. prosecutors indicted dozens of his former associates. Drug flows through Venezuela became an international flashpoint, with U.S. agencies blaming the porous border for allowing traffickers like Varela to evade capture. On the streets, however, the drug trade never truly ceased. It simply morphed. New backrim, or criminal bands, filled some of the old vacuum, but the name Varela receded into infamy. Today, Varela is remembered as a cautionary example in the narco world, a man who rose through bloodshed but couldn't outrun betrayal. His nickname, Jabón, is still whispered in Colombian investigative files, by officers and traffickers alike, as the boss-turned-traitor tale. As one Treasury Press release put it years earlier, he was the very definition of a dangerous assassin-turned-drug lord. Ultimately, Jabón's story tells a grim truth. In the drug war, today's kingpin can become tomorrow's corpse. If you want more, click the videos on your screen. And don't forget to like this video, share with someone who needs to see it, and also subscribe to Mob Boss. The cartel never sleeps, and neither do we.